May I request you all to please switch off your phones? And may I request you all to please rise? His Honor, Justice Yatindra Singh presiding. Please be seated. The Union of India and the respective state governments propose to set up an interstate river linking project through the construction of a series of dams on 2 rivers and a canal to link them. The petitioners, Khoj International Artists Association and Zuleikha Chaudhari, had earlier challenged the clearance given to the project in the National Green Tribunal and subsequently in the Supreme Court of India. The respective petitions, however, came to be dismissed on the basis that the benefits on the projects outweighed the harms it caused. Following the dismissal of the cases, large-scale protests broke out in the area, demanding that the government roll back its decision. It, however, refused to do so. The petitioners had previously approached the Petitions Committee of the Lok Sabha in the matter. On being petitioned, both houses of parliament passed a resolution directing the establishment of a commission of inquiry under the Commissions of Inquiry Act 1952. The commission is meeting today to hear testimonies in the case of the petitioners. Counsel and parties, please note that we are bound by the Commissions of Inquiries Act 1952. To inquire into the displacement of persons, prejudice to the rights of livelihood and other rights of tribal persons, forest dwellers, and other persons in the affected areas. To inquire into the loss of customs, tradition, and culture caused by the proposed project, as well as the loss of ancient cultural sites. To hear testimony from all interested persons, specifically artists and their art forms.
Who's appearing for the petitioner?
I am, Your Honor.
And who's for the respondent?
I am, Your Honor.
Ms. Alvarez, let's see, what is a brief argument and how do you intend to prove your matter?
Thank you, sir. This petition is filed in public interest. It represents the concerns of the rural communities, small-scale farmers, tribals, agricultural workers, fisher folk, men and women who are citizens of today, but also the youth, children, and the unborn generation, citizens of tomorrow. All of them feel threatened by this river linking project. This project will cause mass displacement of indigenous communities, an estimated 50,000 families, sir, for the construction of dams alone. It will also submerge forest land, tiger habitat, and destroy thousands of species of flora and fauna. No doubt, studies have been carried out by experts from various academic fields, but their assessment of the river linking project is generally in terms of cost-benefit analysis only, basically economic terms, productivity of the land, what use is the land being put to, and so on. There is no real assessment of the trauma that people and that the ecology goes through. Physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, from their displacement. What about things like sacred groves, deities, things which make part of their lives? These indigenous persons are compelled to give up all, give up everything, so that people elsewhere will benefit from the water that comes to them from the irrigation that is promised. What do we offer them in return? Rehabilitation. But is rehabilitation really an answer? Can people who know only one way of life that is closely related to their natural surroundings, to the mountains, the rivers, the fields, the flowers, can they start anew in new surroundings? Will they survive in a concrete jungle that they are completely unfamiliar with and where their lifestyle skills are of no use? Imagine the reverse, sir. What would happen if we, accountants, lawyers, doctors, scientists, are put into a jungle and asked to survive? Would we last even a day? Indigenous people also do not believe that nature is to be exploited the way planners, project developers do. They see themselves as an intrinsic part of nature. They live and they die with nature, so to speak. And this biodiversity, which has come up over thousands of years, may never be really replaced. So now the question would be, what does an art organization, what do artists have to do with this? Sir, artists see not just the obvious. They also see invisible sides of the trauma that the human beings, the ecology would be subjected to. Because they employ different media, they employ paintings, poetry, song, music, they are able to creatively represent what people feel, how they think, even though language may not be their best skill. And therefore, we feel that it's important for this commission to recognize that while art does not provide a solution, doesn't give you an answer, but it makes you stop, it makes you pause, it makes you think, because it is possible to find alternative solutions. We do not race into disaster. And that, sir, is what I intend to present this morning through the this evening, through the witnesses who will come before you. Thank you.
Your Honor, the case of the state is that the river project has already been cleared by all authorities known to law. Procedure established by law has been followed. The objective costs and benefits has been analyzed and has been determined objectively, and the conclusion, without exception, is that the river linking project is not only necessary for the development of the area covered by the project, but actually will bring long-term benefits to the people in the area. But the cost and benefit analysis is not only quantitative, it also takes into account what my learned friend, with the usual flourish, has talked about: the cultural heritage, habitat, environment, flora and fauna, and the interrelationships between all them in the area covered by the project. It is not the case of the state, Your Honor, that development in general and this particular project does not bring in its wake negative repercussions. There are negative repercussions, but that's the business of law in a democratic society to solve. And that is known to law, and the law has solutions for it. Moreover, in this case, already the committees and the government have tried to mitigate the negative repercussions. We cannot lose sight of the fact that in the area there is a acute shortage of water, and the river linking project will bring solace to the people, not only in terms of water, but agricultural productivity. This stand has been vindicated by the orders of the National Green Tribunal and the Supreme Court. Now the petitioners, and they have succeeded to their credit by having this commission, they want to bring additional evidence through artists as witnesses. The contention of the petitioners is that the evidence of the artists is vital to decide this issue. And since it could not be presented earlier, Your Honor has to take that into account. It is my respectful submission, Your Honor, the evidence that the petitioners seek to adduce is not really relevant. It does not enhance the case of the petitioners. It is irrelevant because it does not touch on the issues objectively. I say that this is the case of the state despite the fact that this commission has been set up and we do not have to stick by the rules of evidence. I am conscious of the fact that the Lok Sabha has directed the reference to this commission and we are bound by that. I would only request Your Honor to note that all issues are open. It's not as if by leading this evidence, Your Honor will scuttle the decision already made. This particular commission will only decide whether the evidence of the artist can actually add to or subtract the decision already made. On the merits of the proposed evidence, I said already that it doesn't take the case of the petitioners any further. I would submit, my Lord, and that's what I will try to establish through cross-examination, that the witness's evidence or artist is divorced from reality. It does not reflect the real issues on the ground. At the best, the artist can look at issues as an observer like anybody else. Moreover, the portrayal of the issues by an artist is experiential, impressionistic, and not really fair. There's no real analysis of the possible benefits and the cost that the people have to pay. The analysis of the probable benefits and the risks and the costs has already been done. The artist simply imported experiences from the past, from other projects, and do not look at this particular project objectively.
Everything to the extent of money, in terms of money. That's what this case of the state
No,
is.
I respectfully submit that it is not only money, but it is actually looking at issues beyond cost benefits in quantitative terms, my Lord. But I only want to add, my Lord, that artists are not looking at the issue as impartial observers on the merits of the case. I would respectfully submit, to the artist it doesn't really matter whether poor people get the benefits of development, because for them, the portrayal of the art form is so important, they are selfish enough to portray only that. That will be the case I will try to put to Your Honor. Many thanks.
What happened?
Despite the fact the matter has been upheld by the Supreme Court, yet the Parliament has referred the matter to the Commission, it shows that at least the government or someone there thinks there's something in the matter of, there's something in the case of the petitioner. That's why it has come to the Commission. We'll see that in the race. Produce your witnesses. But please, may I remind you, limit yourself to as brief as possible, and if possible, within 10 minutes.
Yes, sir. Your Honor, we have Mr. Ravi Agarwal as our first witness. Please state your name.
My name is Ravi Agarwal.
Please take the oath.
I, Ravi Agarwal, do solemnly affirm to speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Mr. Agarwal, what is your profession?
I'm an artist.
When you say you are an artist, what particular art do you do, or what do you practice?
I work with the mediums of photography, video, installation, public art, and I also look at issues from environmental justice and ecology.
Through your art, you look at environment, justice, and ecology. That's very interesting.
Yes.
Where do you work?
I work out of New Delhi.
Only in New Delhi or elsewhere as well?
I've done work in multiple locations, in Gujarat, in South India, in Calcutta. Wherever my work takes me, I go.
All right. Since how long are you an artist?
At least for 20 years.
Okay, in Delhi, is there any particular place that you have done work?
I've done a lot of work along the banks of the river Yamuna and examined multiple issues around it.
Okay, so do you have any specific artwork which relates to the Yamuna river landscape?
I've done a variety of works. I'd like to show one short film. It's called The Flower Pluckers.
What is it about? Briefly.
It's about the farming of marigolds on the river bank near the border of Delhi.
Your Honor, may I present a clip from the film, The Flower Pluckers.
Video Q1.
Don't you think it's repeating itself?
सारे फूल दिल्ली में ही जाते
Or is the continuation same? Oh.
Well, the judge mentioned that there was a little bit of repetition, but apart from that, what is the significance of the marigold pluckers, the clip that you have shown in relation to development, because we are looking at a development project here. Is there any significance that you would like to particularly state?
Well, the film really is a documentation of a very old practice of growing flowers for the local market on the river bank, on the river Yamuna. They use no fertilizer, no external inputs, but it depends on the fertility of the soil. So, and there are villagers who've been living there for 200 years, and it's mostly family labor. And it shows cohabitation of nature and man in a very traditional way, but also in a way in which it makes economic sense. So you can call it like a sustainable local ecology, which is quite self-sustained. And I think that's a model which one can think about for other landscapes as well.
Do they impact on the land in any way by doing their business? Are they impacting in any way on the land where they work?
Well, there's no long-term impact in the way we think of impact, because there is no toxicity added to the soil, and the landscape is not constructed upon or changed. So the impact, any agriculture has some impact, but there is no major impact, one would say.
What about the real estate value of the land? After all, this is Delhi.
The real estate value of the land is very high, increasingly high, and the price of land as capital is much more than land is productive.
So how do these farmers see it? Do they see the real estate value?
The farmers are aware of the real estate value, but they want to continue farming like this. And this is part of their social network, also the community in which they live. So it's more than just farming, it's a whole lifestyle in which they're engaged.
But tell me, is this marigold farming, is it sustainable? Can they live off this business of cutting flowers and selling it and going back?
Well, they've been living off it for at least a couple of 100 years, so I would guess you would call it sustainable.
Would you say that this model can be replicated, or a similar model is sustainable in other parts of the country?
I would argue many such models already exist in many parts of the country, if we have the eyes and the ears to see them, and they are already present. It's only when we come with another idea of sustainability or development that we start looking at other parameters.
With reference to this river linking project, have you any idea whether there is such an occupation going on in the river linking area?
Along all river banks in the country, there are several kinds of occupation going on which have been sustainable for a very long time. Not only horticulture farming, but other kinds of farming, other kinds of exchanges which take place with the river. So any river landscape in the country will have many sustainable lifestyles alongside with it.
I'm going to ask you one last question. Think, because it's important to this commission. Does your engagement with these marigold pluckers or your work in other places as an artist, does it have any relevance to law and to justice?
I think what the issues which get raised when you intervene in a project like this or a landscape like this are issues of rights. The rights of people who live there, who holds the first right, but also the under-recognized rights of nature, because it's not only about the human being, but a web of life and multiple species which live there. So I think when you bring in the issue of rights, then from my understanding, it's a matter of justice.
Thank you, Mr. Agarwal.
Thank you.
Your Honor, that's all my examination in chief of this witness.
Sure.
Mr. Agarwal, you talked about the fact that it's local and sustainable, Mr. Marigold. Would you agree with me that it's sustainable because it involves only a small group of people?
If you examine the whole economy of that landscape and the connections with the market, then the area I examined was 20 kilometers long and flowers were growing there. It also extended in the adjoining state of Haryana, where also the flowers are being growing. They have a supply and demand equilibrium. So they grow as much as is required. If more was required, I would believe more people would be engaged with that growing.
But if the whole population were wanting to have marigolds, would you think it would be sustainable?
I think the whole population requires different kinds of sustainability, different kinds of uses for the landscape. Marigolds will be grown where they're required to be grown, but other things are grown, or other such ecological landscapes serve the human nature interrelationship wherever that's required. So it's not, I don't think the question is about marigolds alone, but a demonstration of what a sustainable ecology looks like.
Now,
Just a second, Mr. Agarwal, when you answer, please look at me.
Yes, sure.
I
That
really
is a
want to
normal
really
practice.
understand I want to understand your importance of your evidence.
I will from now on.
now, Mr. Agarwal, the film that was shown by you, it depicted the use exclusively of manual labor. An enterprising Indian may think of competing with that and introduce new technology like machine pluckers. Can you prevent that?
My argument is not against technology. My argument is about improving the conditions within the existing landscape and not destroying it, not converting it completely in an ad hoc manner into something else. So I'm not against the introduction of technology or of improvement, but it has to be done with caution and with thought. So it serves the right purpose of the people who are sustaining themselves of these landscapes.
But surely, Mr. Agarwal, in a capitalist society, neither you nor me nor the government can control the introduction of technology by a competitor.
Technology is introduced if we allow it to be introduced in an appropriate manner. If we allow technology to be introduced in a manner in which it overtakes everything else, then the people who introduce the technology have control over the technology. It's a matter of through whose lives one is aiding. If one is aiding the lives of the local community, of the community which is already sustainably living there, then they should have the power to increase the technology there. And I don't think that they will be self-destructive when they improve the technology. Or if they want to change it, it should emerge from that place, not from another.
But if technology were introduced, this might become unsustainable.
I don't think so. As I said earlier, technology, the question is not about technology. The question is who makes the decision for somebody else? Who holds the cards in deciding one's future? I think the question is not about technology in terms of if that's how one defines development, but in development from another place with another idea, then it's really what is happening at the local landscape.
You mean to say that it's the people living there should take a decision?
That's right, Your Honor.
So you want to alter the system of decision making, which doesn't exist at the moment.
I think in our constitution, we already have the provisions of decision making at the local level. Our amendments, 73rd and 74th Amendment, give that right to the local community to make those decisions. Unfortunately, I think that's not been fully implemented, or we don't take note of that very important part of a democratic constitution.
Would you agree, Mr. Agarwal, that in a country like India, with its mass poverty, development and industrialization is necessary for jobs?
The assumption is that development, as the way Mr. Grover defines it, or urbanization, industrialization, creates jobs. The current data is that industrialization does not necessarily create more jobs. Industrialization has become so technology-oriented that the jobs created are far fewer than what's required. So I think industrialization without thinking actually displaces people, and the people who displace have no ability to participate in the new technologies and new industrializations which have been created. They have no skill sets to participate. So they become completely alien from that particular life and lifestyle, and many of them end up as migrant labor.
But surely the government has to look at all the citizens, including the marigold farmers and others who want to have jobs. For them, there is need of industrialization development. They have to balance the interest of all parties.
I think, from my perspective, a government, elected government, has to look at each individual, each person's rights, because that's what's guaranteed in the Constitution. It is not like a feudal system where there's a praja and everybody looks after the whole praja. It has to be evolved with keeping everybody's rights in place. When the government of the day intervenes, then it's the first right of the people not to have a worse life than before, and not to be traumatized, because they are as citizens as anybody else. And we also ignore the idea of rights of nature. Under recognized rights, what nature has rights. Can we just cut trees? Can we just destroy rivers? Can we just allow the fish to die? They're also part of this living planet as we are.
Mr. Agarwal, I'm going to a different topic. Would you agree that quantitative cost-benefit analysis is necessary also, or is it completely irrelevant because you're an artist?
I think cost-benefit analysis has severe limitations, because the assumption
Mr.
is...
Agarwal, please answer the question. I know you like to speak, but please answer the question first, and then you may elaborate if you do want to.
I don't agree with you that cost-benefit analysis is absolutely necessary as the only mode of determining whether something should be changed or not changed. And I was trying to elaborate why it's a problem. It's a problem because everything cannot be reduced to an economic fact. Man is not an economic fact. Nature is not an economic fact. We hold multiple values. And I would even argue that the values of our Constitution are not economic values. When you expect me to be a patriotic citizen, you don't put an economic value to it. It's a value. So values cannot be measured.
You mean to say that everything cannot be quantified in terms of value?
Yes, Your Honor. And I would add to that that not every value can be identified in a way which can be quantified. There are many, many qualitative values which we hold very dear in our existence, which we cannot measure in cost-benefit analysis.
But there is also a necessity to have cost and benefit analysis. It may not be sufficient. Would you agree that there is a necessity also to have it?
I would not be against any kind of model you want to make evaluation, but I would say one should be doing it with great caution and not make it the overriding way in which decisions are taken. Currently, it seems that the decision taking in this particular case is done primarily on the basis of cost-benefit analysis, and that, I think, misses out a whole set of parameters which we are not able to see.
Mr. Agarwal, in your examination as chief, you never mentioned that you had actually looked at the merits of this case. Am I correct in understanding that you haven't actually looked at the merits of this particular river linking project?
May I argue that the river linking
Please
project...
answer yes or no first. Mr. Agarwal, you are under cross... Your Lordship may remind him that he is under cross-examination.
He has to answer.
Yes, I agree, but I would like to volunteer that the river linking project is a first of its kind. Not only me, nobody has looked at the merits of this case. There is no history to this particular kind of development. So I would claim that neither Grover, Mr. Grover, you or I have the opportunity at all to look at the merits of this case because there are no merits in this
Mr.
case.
Agarwal, there is no history of river linking in our country, but river linking is something which has been done
For
at
the first
abroad.
time, Your Honor.
That's, I mean, have you been to those countries? Have you seen how the project was? That's exactly what he meant was.
Your Honor, river linking introduces something called inter-basin transfers. You transfer water from one basin to another. We cannot understand basins except in immediate and particular topologies. I cannot look at a basin in Europe and say this applies to the Ganga or to the Yamuna. So we have to examine it on its own merits.
Which you haven't done, Mr. Agarwal.
And I would argue, Mr. Grover, not have you.
No, of course, that's not my job. But you have opined on it, and you wish to opine on it without examining the merits. My job is to ask questions. Your job is to answer. Please, do answer.
I have not looked at the merits of this particular case, and as I would volunteer, not have you. But also what I'm bringing to the fore is the kind of landscapes we need to look at, is the kind of values which we need to look at. And I would, as I said, values are critical to my being a citizen. So values are very critical to everything we need to look at. Unfortunately, in the current case, we've had such an overriding decision without examining all the other possibilities that we have not opened ourselves to other ways of looking at things.
Mr. Agarwal, you would agree that there's a huge problem in the project area of water shortage, drought. Am I right? Do you agree with that?
Arguably there's a huge problem.
Or you disagree with it?
I disagree with it in the terms that it is not only in that area there's a water problem.
Yes, but
water problems.
Please, this case, there is a water shortage or not? Let's agree on the basic facts.
There's a seasonal water shortage.
Very well. So if the river linking project goes through, there'll be less shortage of water. Am I right or not?
That is the proposal. I don't agree from the data I've seen that it will be the case.
Very well. Now, Mr. Agarwal, are you answering these questions as an artist or just as an ordinary citizen?
Your Honor, I'm an artist because I'm a citizen. There's no difference between the two. I do my art because I'm a citizen. And I try to bring the value which I hold dear as a citizen through my art. And this is what I've been saying throughout the cross-examination, that I'm trying to bring the values which make me a citizen. And my art is just a method of doing that.
So, am I right in understanding that there's nothing special about being an artist?
As there is not being a lawyer, Mr. Grover, because I would argue, as I would argue, you bring a certain set of values to the table, I bring another set of values to the table. We are both serving the same purpose.
Mr. Agarwal, some would argue that lawyers are prostitutes. Are artists such people?
I cannot speak for lawyers, Mr. Grover, but I can speak for artists. Artists certainly hold values very dear to them. They do it because that's the way they feel about things. Most artists don't make much money, unlike lawyers. So I think being an artist is a very, very noble profession.
There's a hint of jealousy here.
Not at all, Mr. Lawyer, Mr. Grover. I commend you your success.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Agarwal, are you making all these comments as a participant or merely as an observer through the artist's eyes?
Your Honor, I don't see the difference between a participant and an observer. I'm a participant and observer at the same time. I am participating in the process, I'm observing, and I'm bringing something to the table. Reflection and participation are two sides of the same involvement. I'm deeply involved in what I'm doing, and sometimes as a participant, sometimes as an observer, and an artist certainly, and as a citizen always.
But you're not directly affected by the river linking project. In that sense, you are just an observer.
I'm not directly affected, but I'm deeply affected by it. I'm deeply affected because if you take away the places where I hold value away from me, where should I look for my citizenship? Where should I look for those values which you want me to hold dear as somebody?
Just a second. Please kindly deposit your mobile phone here. Whose phone was that? Whose phone was ringing just now? If you do not deposit your mobile phone, I'll ask everyone to deposit phone calls here, mobile phones here. Whose mobile phone was ringing just now? Mr. Grover,
My lords,
this is very strange.
my lord, I'll request the audience to just deposit it and they can take it with your lordship's permission.
Yeah, sure. After the court rises, you can always take it. I mean, it's not confiscated forever. I mean, it's for time being till the court is in session.
I can't find whose phone rang. If it happens the next time, my lord, I'll take responsibility and I'll do it.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Agarwal, would you agree that in democracy, majorities have an important role?
Yes, I would agree, as do minorities and everybody else too.
Yeah, but we run by majorities. Do you agree?
I don't agree. I don't think democracies are majority driven. I think majorities are elected democratically, but then once you're there, everybody's rights have to be equally protected.
Well, if there are two people having competing interests, isn't the state required to balance the interest? And sometimes one of the groups does get the way they want to, and the other loses out. But state is not oblivious to that. It also looks after the persons who lose out by, in this case of rehabilitation. Isn't that good enough for you?
It's a theoretical argument you're putting to me. However, I understand that you're talking about rehabilitation of people who are displaced. I can only go by past record of rehabilitation. It's been dismal, Your Honor. People who have been displaced from mega projects and displacing from their landscapes have not been rehabilitated to the promise which they've been given.
Have you made any clip about rehabilitation project that's been done by the government?
I have read a lot of data on rehabilitation. I'm also aware, Your Honor, of an innumerable number of cases, both in the Honorable Supreme Court and the High Courts, which deal with rehabilitation and the lack of it. I don't understand why the promised rehabilitation has never been fulfilled, and that time and again people have to approach the judiciary for justice when this is promised to them. So I would say that I would deeply distrust the rehabilitation. Besides, the rehabilitation is done only in specific terms of specific kinds of rehabilitation. The whole social network is destroyed. The whole landscape is destroyed. Can we rehabilitate a forest we have cut? Can we rehabilitate a river we have destroyed? We cannot. We don't have the technology or the methods to do it.
Mr. Agarwal, you seem to be so incensed with development and its negative impacts. Have you seen anything in terms of positive development?
Mr. Grover, my film is an example of positive development, I would assume.
Yeah, but I'm talking about large-scale projects.
I think you can examine many large-scale projects where things have been done differently, where people's wishes have been taken into account, where people have found jobs. One of the problems with not finding too many examples of them is because they don't exist. We have taken away people's lives and not given anything back to them. So where do we look for such large-scale projects as you're mentioning? The promises of the large-scale projects have been completely belied after independence.
That's only in India, I presume. Anywhere in the world, do you have any positive examples of development?
I don't think we can talk out of the context of our particular democratic system. There are many different political systems existing in China, in other parts which are not democratic. I would still keep my argument based on the system and the promises of citizenship which our nation state brings to us.
But Mr. Agarwal, if you don't have any examples of positive development, Surely you can't thrust this imaginary position onto the state.
Well, since you bring the issue of the state, I would say we're talking of a state, that is our state, the nation state. The nation state, in this nation state, I do not know of many great examples of positive development.
Mr. Agrawal, I put it to you that as an artist, you are actually bringing your views, not in objective terms, on the analysis of this project, but only in subjective terms, in an impressionistic way.
The parameters under which this particular project which we're discussing has been brought forth are no different from the parameters of the past project we just discussed and the disastrous effect they've had. So I don't see why we cannot take the learnings from those projects and just put them here. That's what's going to happen here too.
Mr. Agrawal, may I ask you a very simple question? Do you believe in utopia?
Maybe, maybe not. It's a very difficult question to answer.
I put it to you that your vision of the future is a romanticized, artistic impression of a utopian world, which you want to thrust on this commission as a recommendation.
I would argue that all justice has to be utopian. All ideas of human society have to be utopian. If that's not what we are aspiring for, what kind of justice are we aspiring for? Why do you have a legal system? Why do you have social networks? Is it not for an idea of utopia, of a betterment, of happiness? So if I choose to bring those fundamental ideas to the notice of this commission, am I not staying with the boundaries of the premise of what this commission or any judiciary or any jurisprudence is all about, my honor, your honor?
Well, I've done with this witness. Thank you.
Mr. Grover, I wish the next time we do a sitting here, there would be better air conditioning. Kindly see to it. Yes. Please. Next witness. Yeah.
Thank you.
Your Honor, we have Ms. Navjot Altaf as our second witness.
You just asked me completely on the
Madam,
script.
please state your name.
My name is Navjot Altaf.
Will you please take the oath?
I, Navjot Altaf, do solemnly affirm
that I will tell the truth,
I will tell the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
but nothing but the truth.
Ms. Altaf, what is your profession? Can you state your profession?
I'm a visual artist.
What does visual artist mean?
Well, visual artist, my art practice involves drawing, painting, sculptures, video installation and art in public spaces.
These are the different types of artwork that you produce.
Yes, in a way, and they're also interrelated.
Where do you work?
I work in Mumbai and I work in Chhattisgarh. But I also work in places where I'm invited to do projects.
Where do you live?
I live in Mumbai.
So you travel to these places periodically?
Yes.
Do you stay in these places for some time or you just go and come back?
Depends upon the projects, but I stay for long durations in Chhattisgarh.
So you're not just a visitor going, looking and coming back. You do work in those areas?
Yes.
Do you work with people in those areas?
Yes. In Bastar, I have been working with people, the Adivasi communities and the artists from the area around South Bastar. And my research is in the northern central part of Chhattisgarh. That is in Korba and Raigad.
Are there artists in that area? Are people artists?
There
How
are
do you
artists.
see it?
I have seen wonderful plays produced by the local theatre groups.
So you would accept that local people, indigenous people with no specific training are also artists and would explain art in their own right?
No, they are wonderful artists and they are artists in their own rights, and they are also working on current issues. It's not that they are looking at, we have to look at their works as one looked at years ago. So they are very deeply engaged with the current issues.
Ms. Altaf, what is your view on mining?
Well, as far as I understand mining, I feel that mining is being viewed to be you know, vital for the national development and advanced development. And but when I look at the landscape which is transformed drastically, and the way, you know, the whole you know, the way it is being carried out, in my sensibility, it is moving with furious energy in an absolutely opposite direction which is causing slow violence, but it is not being considered as violence because the focus is on the progress and development, in which intersection of regional and national politics is entangled with imperatives of development and power of global and national capital.
You said that one of the things you have, your art is video films.
Yes.
Have you made, that's why I asked you the question about mining. Have you made any films about this Adivasi culture or mining or any of these kind of subjects?
Yes, it's taken me very long to understand what is going on there, and so for past, after my research in last 5 years in the northern central part and in Belladela in South Bastar, I think I can speak about what my understanding of that area is. So I'm working on a film still in process called Soul, Breath, Wind.
What is, you said soul, breath, wind.
Wind.
Would you briefly explain this enigmatic title, very briefly?
Well, you see, this came out from when an Adivasi who had lost his land, and she said to me that the mining must be you know, profitable for somebody, for the.
She had lost the land in the mining area.
Yes, she is being forced, she is not given up yet, but she said it must be you know, profitable for the soul of the person, the company, but it's not for the soil of Adivasi. So that's how, you know, this title evolved.
All right. So maybe, sir, maybe show a clip of the film as our evidence.
Video clip 2, cue.
Well, there is a bird that we see in the film, is that right?
There are many animals and birds. These are images painted on memorial pillars.
Yes.
And which are, memorial pillars are erected in public spaces. So this is some of the imagery from those places.
So,
and also in the interiors where actually this dance performance takes place.
is this a dance performance that you were showing?
Yes, it's a dance performance because this film is still in a process. So one doesn't see the whole thing in this because it's going to be multi-channel, so they're not going to be on one screen. So it might be that there is these images this side or the performance that side or various other things, so which will be interrelated. Yes, these are all the paintings and drawings are from the areas which are done on the memorial pillars.
So you mentioned that Soul, Breath, Wind is about mining, or it was inspired by a person who lost their land, and it was an impact on people. Has this mining or the work that you have done, has it shown any impact on the land? What we see is people being disturbed in a sense.
See, when I started this work, I thought of questioning the changing and the constantly changing socio-political and economic transformation of the land. It's not just the land, and also addressing the issues of the people who are struggling against the powerful forces for committing crime of increasing vulnerability of biodiversity, and which is actually leading to disintegration of the communities and affecting their culture and their cultural practices.
So is there any section of your film which deals with the land?
Yes, yes.
So
for that I would like to show a clip.
Sir, maybe show a second clip from this film. I will, sir, I will.
Video Q3.
जनवरी 2008 को जब लाठीचार्ज किया उस समय से हमारा 3 केस चल रहा है। पहले हम कभी भी केस 20 साल के लोग बाद एक भी केस नहीं जाता था, लेकिन अब तो घर घर में पेशी चलने के लिए चालू हो गया। तो जब से आया है जिंदाल डर डर के जी रहे हैं, उनको भी कभी मार देगा, जाते रहेंगे ट्रक में दबा देगा, ये सब हो रहा है। फूट करो और राज करो, जिंदाल का तो नियम है। हमारा जमीन लेगा तो हम क्या करेंगे, हमारा भूखे मरेंगे तो हम भी नक्सलाइट बनेंगे।
This violence which you see, which is done to the land, which is done to the people, does it ever go away? Do people forget it when they are rehabilitated, when they go elsewhere? Do they forget this thing? Can they start life again?
You see, I've been to those places from where people have been displaced and where people have been relocated. So if you go there, I mean, I've been to at least five of those colonies where they have been, relocated. And most of those places do not have water or, there's no vegetation and no water, or even if the facilities are provided by the companies or whoever has acquired their land, there's no water. And it is when you are in that place that you realize that how haunting those places are and how ghostly they are. And then when you are with people who have been affected, you realize that there is a sense of, one gets a sense of that how any kind of humiliation, subjugation or eraser haunts. And haunting is the cost of subjugation, I feel, and it's the price paid for the violence.
So this is a kind of unseen violence.
It is a
which
kind
is
of
not
unseen
easily
violence.
recognized.
Yes.
You would say that.
Yes.
Is an artist able to convey this kind of complexities, this thing that people are feeling inside them, perhaps don't speak? Can they convey it through their artworks? Is there a way?
You see, that's why it's taken me so many years to even dare making a work on the situation there, which is so complex. But what I do is that I see a link in the narrative and in the complexity of the reality. But as we know, even when you are listening to the narrative, or even if you are listening to the people, somebody who has been, displaced from the place, one is never able to understand it fully, because any kind of narrative or testimony contains lacuna.
One last question, Mr. Altaf, because I have to cut it short. Is there any connection that you see with law, with justice, any connection in your art which can impress a commission, a court of law, with law and justice?
I would say that by engaging myself with the communities there and by being with the people who are struggling, I have been able to experience the concept of aesthetics of sustainability, which inquires into the meaning and implication of justice and in pluralistic manner, and also it conveys its humility towards the non-human.
Thank you, Ms. Altaf. Your Honor, this is all my examination of chief of this witness.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Altaf, you mentioned you actually reside in Mumbai. Is that correct?
I live in Mumbai.
And you only visit Bastar as an observer?
No, I don't go there as an observer, but I have been, like I said, that I have been working there for past 20 years. So my work with the Adivasi artists, which are collaborative, and with the community, and my research, for that I stay there for the longer durations of periods.
And I presume that you don't do this as an for an altruistic purpose, but only to satisfy your own ego.
Well, it's not a question of ego. I have been trying to, I've been sensing a culture other than in which I have not grown. And for a long time, I've been trying to sensitizing myself to understand or to, the nuances of the knowledge system of that culture. But there are perpetual unravelings.
Are you telling me that you don't get any pleasure or satisfaction from doing this work in Bastar?
Well, the pleasure is in the self-transformation.
So it is really for you, isn't it?
Well, in a way, yes, because I feel that self-reflexivity, because it is for self-reflexivity, and self-reflection helps to unlearn and to free yourself from your own conditioning.
And it is this that you want to bring to this commission or to the world at large?
Well, I want to speak about it through collaborative and interactive processes.
And when you go to Bastar, is there electricity in the house you live in?
I have electricity, but basic, minimum and very low voltage.
And in Mumbai, you have it all, don't you?
In Mumbai, because residents can buy and pay as much the tariff.
And may I ask, where do the Mumbai residents get it from?
They get it from power plants and through private suppliers.
So, power plants are necessary for this country, aren't they?
Power plants are necessary, but Mr. Grover, don't you think in 21st century...
Ms. Altaf, may I remind you, you are under cross-examination. I asked the questions and you only answer them.
I think artists have the prerogative to ask questions, but I'll complete it.
But my honor, your honor, please remind the witness of her duties and I shall stick to mine.
All right, I'll turn my question into answer. So my answer would be that in 21st century, we need to look at the way we are generating electricity.
Oh, you have another way of generating electricity?
There are other ways of generating electricity.
Which are more efficient, I presume.
Sorry?
Which are more efficient.
There are.
Well, I would like this material from Ms. Altaf, if she can bring it later on.
Later.
Very well.
Was
the
renewable in its source of energy.
Well,
like
Your Honor,
that's what I understand.
I would request Your Honor for the witness to say it.
All right.
Since she is coming in a special capacity
as
an artist.
No, I would say that...
I would remind you, Mr. Grover, that certain facts can always be taken judicial notice of.
Lordship pleases. Now, Ms. Altaf, in the area that you are in, Bastar, they're mostly poor people, right?
Yes.
Don't you think development, electricity, etc. is necessary for their development?
See, I've never denied that development is not necessary, but what is important is, or what I feel is, if the goal of global economy is to maximize the wealth of its elites, then I think we are not thinking about most of the people that you are asking me to talk about, and then we have to think of other, maybe we have to reflect on what indigenous communities all over the world have said, and I will quote one where I think it's from the First Nation people. They say that if it's not only about the survival of ourselves, it is the responsibility of each generation to ensure the survival of the seventh generation. So what I am concerned about is that what is the kind of relationship between the development and the profit, and that should be, that's the kind of paradigm shift I feel that we need to look at.
But Ms. Altaf, you wouldn't be against industrial development or development if it benefits the local population?
Well, I am not against the development as such, but what kind of development? And development also carries different meanings for different people. So one of the participants in my film talks about he talks about actually the capitalist agenda of development at any cost, and no matter what the effects, and in that how hope for the one mingles with the loss of another, and that is actually the loss one needs to look at, and it's a loss of a culture which has been developed into, developed over centuries, and where people's understanding of aesthetics of integration or deep ecology, or their sense of sustainability or the Anthropocene is not destroyed. So, and I am interested in also including the cultural dimensions of development in the discourse of sustainability.
So you're not against industrial development. You seem to have some problem with corporates in development. Am I right?
Well, along with the public sector, corporates have been contributing to the push the economic growth in this country, and also in some cases by undertaking socially responsible initiatives if with transparency and honesty, then I think it has worked. But since I am in that area and I have first-hand experience with not only with the affected people, but also with the company, the corporate people, to understand what CSR money is. But in many cases, they have said CSR money is not being used for the purpose it should be used. And they have said that, even the company people have said that there are hindrances in Indian procedures.
Would you agree with me that in India, with this large-scale poverty, we need rapid development?
Yes, we need development, but we have to see what kind of development. And who decides and for whom the development is.
Do you see anything positive in development, or do you see only the negative?
Well, it's not a question of negative or positive, and neither can I answer his question in black and white. But I would like to, since I'm not allowed to ask questions, but I'll turn my question into an answer by saying that if it is progress, then how is it that every living being
you're again asking a question.
Can I finish this? It's not. I'm answering to myself and for others also, that how is it that every living being, all right, it is for you, Your Honor. So,
is it an answer or a question?
Well, I have turned it into answer now, but it's an important answer for me, or a question, whatever. But if you allow me to finish it, I feel that if it is progress, then how is it that every living being on the planet is facing high consequences, risks, and dreadful environmental harm, which the sociologists Gideon and Beck have said are manufactured risks. So I am more interested in dealing with these manufactured risks rather than saying whether I'm interested in positive or negative. We can't look at development in isolation.
Mr. Grover, may I say something?
Yes, Your Honor.
Evidence Act is not applicable to these proceedings.
No, I understand.
And the strict procedure, cross-examination may not be here.
I appreciate
These people
it.
are, after all, artists, and they are slightly different than the normal set of people.
Well,
I think some
that's why we should be
greater
allowed,
latitude should be
so
given.
That's why we should be allowed to ask questions.
May I, in honor, say that these are not ordinary artists. They seem to have been very conversant with legal procedures.
Yes.
And your Lordship will understand what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
Certainly not. I don't think
he's subtly suggesting something else, but
so it's coming. Maybe it'll come.
Please go ahead.
Mr. Altaf, please, would you agree that each individual has only a partial understanding of reality?
No, I'll add that it's not only partial, but it's also conditioned.
So, like everybody else, you also have a very partial understanding of reality and the project.
Yes, but like I'm going back to self-reflexivity, because the critical reflection, like I said earlier, involves critique of one's own conditioning. And my art practice for past many years have been making me more and more interested in the exploration of method of inquiry, which is multifaceted enough not to reduce reality, but rather engage and honor its complexity. And if we draw from Edgar Morin, I would say that he says that complexity requires multiple logic and cannot be explained on the basis of single and linear logic.
So would I be correct in understanding that your perspective, that you have more questions than answers or solutions?
Well, from the perspective of art, if you look at it, it's more about formulating questions. And we cannot really, or inclination to ask questions. So I would say that we cannot really, art cannot really reach, cannot be brought to a precise point.
So not only is an artist unable to give solutions and answers, but an artist has only a partial understanding of reality.
Well, you know, it's not partial, but we have to see what the position artist has, because again I'm going back to self-reflection. In practice, reflexivity applies to all all forms of research, individual research and individual expression. So in that sense, art is a construction from a subjective position. But I would like to add, for your satisfaction, for you to understand, it's not that simple, because it depends a lot, because art is all, whatever art is made, it is determined by the artist or artists, you know, the collaborative groups, political position, and their experiences and knowledge. So from that you can say it's not partial or it's individual, then it can be read. It also produces different meanings.
Mr. Altaf, don't think I'm asking this question of you, but generally as of an artist, would you agree with me that artists are biased and colored also in their view?
No, I don't think so. They can be, if people have not employed ways to understand the complexity. It can be that you are conditioned and you remain like that, but you always find each artist finds a way to deal with the situation, because every human being, every generation finds a way to deal with whatever they are dealing with.
Ms. Altaf, recently I read of a black American artist showing his work in Hong Kong. He said, all artists are necessarily selfish. What do you say to that?
Like I've already said that, you know, that art is a construction of subjective, you know, position. But that position, to come to that position, artist also goes through the processes which are very difficult and which are sometimes like going to certain places in Bastar itself, you know, are so risky, but I do it because I want to understand it deeply.
Thank you, Your Honor. I've done with this witness.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Your Honor, our third and final witness is Ms. Shiba Chachi. Sir, she has not been very well. She has had chikungunya combined with malaria, and if she needs, I will request for a chair for her to sit, in case.
If you want to sit, you can. There's no difficulty. I'm all right for the moment, thank you.
Please state your name.
Shiba Chachi.
Please take the oath.
I,
Shiba Chachi,
Shiba Chachi,
do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
to tell the truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Ms. Chachi, would you state your profession?
I'm an artist.
What kind of an artist? What kind of artwork do you produce?
I usually bring together a number of different mediums: photographic image, video, sound, objects, light in space, to create an immersive environment and installation.
What would you say is, how would you describe immersive environment?
It is an environment in which a multi-sensorial experience is created, where different registers, different mediums, and different parts of your senses are brought into conversation with the statement that the artwork seeks to make.
Where do you work?
I live and work in Delhi, but also work in multiple other contexts.
Any specific place in Delhi that you work?
A lot of my time in the last 10 years or 15 years, since 2000, has been engaged with the ecosystem of Delhi and the kind of crisis that this urban ecology is facing. So a lot of my work looks very much at our river, which is now a nala rather than a river, the Yamuna.
The Yamuna River. How long have you been, you said 15 years you have been working in Delhi?
I have been working as an artist for more than 20 years, but for the last 15 years I have focused more on ecological and environmental issues, particularly Delhi and the Yamuna.
Is there any artwork relating to the Yamuna River that you would like us to exhibit?
I wish to present a work which is actually about urban ecology, about the city, which includes issues that arise with the Yamuna, but brings in a broader perspective. It is an installation called Neelkant, Poison Nectar.
So maybe show the installation as our third exhibit.
Video Q4.
Poison in the earth, poison in fire, poison in water, poison in air, poison in ether. All the 5 elements are in a state of poison. Poisoned minds, poisoned bodies, poisoned psyche, poisoned society. As you enter the capital city, you are greeted by garbage. Mounds of waste flank the portals into the capital. Enter now an imagined city. Here too, images of garbage act as gates into the installation. Enter the field of the installation. You are looking down on the city, a bird's eye view. Hundreds of gleaming, reflecting miniature skyscraper-like towers. Each tower carries an illuminated photograph of one of the 5 sense organs. For here, the 5 elements and its homologous 5 senses, smell, sight, taste, touch, hearing, are in a state of extreme toxicity. The cityscape is a massive living organism, a body. You are led to the center where the parts illuminated by garbage converge at a blue video image. The throat struggles ceaselessly, trying to ingest, trying to contain the poison, the vast mounds of garbage that the city has become. For once, the gods and demons decided to work together, usually on opposite sides. This time they had to collaborate. And why was this? Independently, they could not achieve their desire, for they were greedy for immortality. They knew they could not produce Amrit on their own. Of course, they planned to cheat each other once they had extracted the Amrit. The serpent Vasuki was the rope, Mount Meru was the pivot, and on one side were the demons and on the other side were the gods, and they began to churn. As they churned the ocean, a number of magical things appeared, Kamadhenu, the wish-fulfilling star, etc., etc. But no Amrit. They continued to churn, and as they continued to churn, the ocean began to heave and spit and grow hot. And as it grew hotter and began to boil, all the plants and all that was surrounding the ocean began to fall into the waters and cook in this strange kind of heaving mass. The mass turned black and hot, and it became this terrible poison, Kalkuta, the poison of time. This threatened to destroy the entire universe. Horrified by what they had done, the gods cried out. Shiva, moved by compassion for the fate of the world, opened his mouth and swallowed this poison. Even he could not take it in. He kept it in his throat, contained it, and his throat turned blue, and he was henceforth known as Nilkanta. This installation works with the myth of Nilkanta as an allegory for the kind of condition we find ourselves in, where our greed for the good life, for a kind of immortality, has produced a situation of extreme poison.
Ms. Chachi, your story was good, your picture was good, but tell me, or tell the Commission, what relevance are myths to today's reality? We are talking of development, and you are relying on a myth.
Myths are embodiments of different forms of knowledge, different knowledge systems, different epistemologies, different ways of articulating the relationship between us and the rest of nature. Myths are also a critical part of the Indian imaginary, and we can see in the contemporary moment how myths are being used, manipulated to pursue various agendas. I believe that in these stories, in the folk songs, in these narratives, which have often been turned into mechanical ritual and lost meaning, lie the nuggets of eco-philosophy, of forms of wisdom and ways of looking at this relationship, at these sets of relationship, from which we can learn and rethink the ways in which we address the ecological crisis today.
I'm sorry. May I ask one question
Yes, please,
in
sir.
between? It's not typically like a...
I think your honor has a right to ask.
Thank you. Do you wish to say that this development is also producing a poison, and we should have something kind Lord Shiva, who could actually take it? I mean, is this something of this kind you're trying to say? That if you have a development, you will always have, like you've shown, a garbage here and there. I mean, that's a kind of a poison of a modern era. But do you wish me to say that before we go for development, or before we decide to go for it, we must have Lord Shiva with us?
Lord Shiva, I think, is quite busy these days because there's a lot of poison and a lot of demands on his time. No, it is an allegory. It is talking about the fact that we today have all become Nilkants, who are struggling to deal with this poison that is entering our system every moment that we inhabit the city of Delhi. So the myth is to open up a different way of thinking about the city, a different way of thinking about the development paradigm, which can produce poison. Do remember that nectar turned into poison, but poison can also become nectar. They are the old alchemical principle where one partakes of the other.
Yeah.
So can going back to myths help us to understand knowledge systems? Because I think that's what you're trying to say, that there are different knowledge systems. Can it do that?
I believe so. I believe that what we're facing today is actually to do with a fundamental flaw in our thinking, in the way we're thinking about development, about the relationships between humans and nature. There's already a separation set up when you say humans and nature. I would say humans are part of nature. So there are a number of knowledge systems, epistemological modes, which underlie the crisis. When we go to pre-modern thinking, we can find ways, completely different ways of describing these sets of relationships. And from those, in placing them by each other, adjacent to each other, we can open up new ways of thinking about it.
And what role can artists play in conveying these myths, translating them into installations and conveying them to the public? What is your role? What role would you play? Would it be entirely subjective? How would you look at it?
Before I reply directly to that, I'd like to actually tell a small anecdote which I just remembered. While I was working on creating this installation, a friend of mine who's an ecological activist and me had gone to the huge garbage landfills of Delhi, where you're actually not allowed to photograph. So we had illegally entered, said we were school teachers doing a project on waste, and somehow managed to get in. And the overseer of the landfill, we were chatting to him, and I told him about the story of Nilkant and about how this myth was becoming kind of central to my examination of the state of poisoning of Delhi. And he looked at me and he said, "How old do you think I am?" And he looked quite haggard, so I said, maybe 50, 60 years old. And he said, "I am 40 years old and I have been inhaling the methane that rises from this garbage for so many years that I look like I'm 60. And then he looked at me and he said, "Main Nilkant hoon."
So,
may I remind you?
yes. Okay, I will ask her one last question, which I've asked the previous witnesses also. Can an artist intervene effectively in matters of law and justice?
I think of myself as an artist, a witness, as someone who bears witness. However, that witnessing is partisan. I am partisan to a subjective view that has developed out of my engagement, my social, political, and artistic engagement. It is not a neutral or supposedly objective witnessing. I am partisan to certain causes which I think are manifest in what I've said so far. So I think what the artwork brings to the question of law and justice is an opportunity to actually question some of the tenets of the law itself. For example, objective. What does it mean? What does objective fact and truth mean? We're living in the era of alt truth, so what does that actually mean? The other would be looking again at multiple epistemologies, and what do multiple epistemologies bring, say, to the notion of law? So, for example, the idea of consent, which is something that has been much debated in the feminist movement, where I have been active in actually directly being part of campaigns which address the state to bring about legal reform. Here, if you look at the question of consent or choice, when, say, an area, a community, a group of villages are asked to give their consent to a development project through the village panchayat or whatever mechanisms, I really think this is almost as tricky as the question of consent within the feminist debate. And what is missing is an idea of duration. What does a choice mean in the short term, which is some potential profit, and what are the long-term consequences for the very people who think they are making a choice? Duration comes to us through myths, through multiple epistemologies. So that, I think, is something that needs to inflect and alter the thinking of the law itself. One last point I'd like to make, if I'm allowed.
So may I? Brief.
The law itself is entangled in the paradigm that has produced the crisis.
Thank you, Ms. Altaf. I'm done with
Lord, may I just take a cue from your Lordship's question? Ms. Chachi, am I pronouncing it correctly?
It's impossible to do that.
Very well, you'll forgive me. So, according to you, if I understand you correctly, all development as it is today produces the mythical poison. Am I right?
No, I would say the development paradigm that is being followed today produces a very real poison, which we can re-examine through the myth of poison and nectar.
Now, since we don't have the mythical Shiva, we have to develop, according to you, some knowledge systems from ancient traditions, right?
We can draw upon them to develop new forms of understanding, to open up new critical thinking.
Very well. But you have to extract that wisdom, as it were, from the old knowledge systems. But you don't have them at the moment. Am I right?
I'm not sure I follow you. I
Well,
believe, for example, the story of Nilkant is a popular common story. It's about how one is interpreting it, about creating a space for conversation between what kind of wisdom might be useful to us from pre-modern thinking and the contemporary issue.
Very well. What I'm trying to ask you is, the knowledge systems that exist today can borrow, according to you, from ancient wisdom, elements of it, and come up, am I right, with a new knowledge system which can answer the problems that we face.
I don't think it's about picking up X and Y. I think it's about an epistemological change. It's about changing the way you think. And that can develop through an engagement with multiple knowledge systems, both ancient and contemporary.
Multiple knowledge systems would be an answer or a process of trying to solve a problem. Am I right?
Yes, it would be a process from which a kind of thinking could emerge which could possibly propose solutions.
Are you suggesting then that the type of interaction that the development process has doesn't have the interaction of diverse knowledge systems today?
I would say it is overwhelmingly determined by a particular model, a particular paradigm, which is actually of sort of post-industrialization, which is being applied without much concern and consideration of the local conditions. So, for example, if we come to our river linking project, we assume that the production of larger amounts of water, which will be available to, of course, we don't know exactly whom it will be available to, is in itself a good goal, without taking into consideration what that means in the broader context of that ecosystem, in the broader context of the water conditions there, in the broader context of whom that water will be for.
If I were to suggest to you that in fact experts have gone into it and come up with some sort of analysis which answers part of those questions, would you actually disagree with that?
No, I think we need to draw upon all the expertise and all the thinking we can, but with an open, critical frame.
But have you already come to the conclusion, because you feel the knowledge systems are not adequate, that the river linking project only has negative repercussions?
I presented Nilkant because I can see that the river linking project may well produce the conditions which have led to this state of extreme toxicity, that have led to this condition of poisoning. If you look at what urbanization means in the rural hinterland, you look at projections of most of India being urban in a fairly short period of time, and you look at what the nature of that urbanization is, I don't think this is a ill-founded concern.
May I ask you a question which you might think is impertinent, but may I ask it nevertheless? Do you believe in a myths a lot?
Myths for me are a rich source of the imaginary. And I believe it is through multiple articulations of the imaginary that we can actually bring something, something truly productive to our condition.
Just a second, may I ask this clarification? Do you think these myths and the different stories, they have been imagined by the saints in order to say about some kind of a moral or teaching for the people there, and they mixed with the gods and everybody so that the people can easily accept it? Suppose they wanted to give particular moral to the public at large, they put gods into it and put some story into it so that it's accessible.
So if you allow me, I'll tell you another story.
No, this is becoming too much. Everything is another story. Are we going to divorce ourselves from fact? Because this is to do with facts at the end of the day.
Mr. Grover, like I said, that Evidence Act is not applicable. And this question, you cannot not devoid of psychological and emotional issues. And the artists are definitely, slightly special people. I would permit her.
Your Lordship seems to have made up the mind already.
No, not at all, not at all.
So long as I'm assured. Very well.
So I will tell you a story which is about the Yamuna, both as goddess and as river. Now you know that Yamuna is the lover of Krishna. Balram, who is a farmer, Krishna is a cowherd, this difference is really important, desires Yamuna, but she is not interested in him. Now one day Balram has been drinking and he is feeling rather hot. And he calls out, yells out to Yamuna, to the river, saying, "Come and cool me off." And she's a goddess, and she finds this quite offensive, and she says, "If you need to bathe, come to the river and bathe." He puts out his plow. Balram is always shown with his plow. So yes, gods are taking on particular embodiments of the need of the farmer, the need of the cowherd, etc. And with his plow, he begins to pull the Yamuna towards him. The image is of dragging a woman by her hair. She begins to split into a number of tiny streams, and there's a huge, huge conversation between them. She ultimately, I won't go into the details of that, she ultimately realizes that he will destroy her power to nurture by turning her into all these tiny streams. So she acquiesces and floods the grove that he's sitting in. To me, this is like the first dam in mythology. And in the artwork where I've quoted this story, you see below the image of Balram pulling Yamuna towards him, the first dam on the Yamuna as she descends from the Himalayas, which is at Dakpathar, after which there are maybe more than 32 further dams, which are extracting water from the river for purposes of irrigation and generation of electricity. So the problem of the Yamuna is not only the dumping of sewage and effluents, but the fact that she never gets fresh water. And you build up tensions and hostilities between riparian states. I think it's self-evident as to how this can be useful to also rethink the true purposes, the intentions, the vested interests that lie behind any of these attempts.
May I come back to the same question? Do you have an alternative knowledge system framework which can give an answer to the problems that we have today?
No, I don't have anything ready, prepared. That would be, in fact, reproducing the problems of all the knowledge systems which think that they are the answer. No, it is an open field of inquiry, drawing on multiple knowledge systems through which we can think together. The artwork is a site which invites us to think together about these concerns, to perhaps open up areas that we have not yet thought about through a very different kind of interaction, through bringing personal memory, cultural memory, and sensorial experience together, which is where the art becomes, in a sense, public art, pertinent to opening up thinking, developing consciousness about concerns which affect each one of us in our daily lives.
Very well, Ms. Shashi. Have you brought this to the notice of the government, or have you kept it in your pocket or just in your head?
There are multiple ways in which this happens. My work addresses mostly the citizens of Delhi, and if the government actually sees itself also as a citizen, it would be an addressee. Secondly, there are specific artworks where, in fact, the state administration of Delhi has come, seen, engaged in conversations, had dialogues. There was one moment where the then Lieutenant Governor said to me, "You will not be able to make this artwork after 3 years because the conditions will have changed so much." He was so moved by what he saw, and that was in 2008.
But that wasn't taken on
Mr.
board by the
Mr.
government.
Rover, I know in a cross-examination you have much more discretion than the one on the petitioner side.
Well,
Could you
may I
be
just
brief,
quickly finish?
Okay, thank you.
As I understand it, Ms. Shachi, again I'm going back to the same thing. Your view of development is in the negative. Am I right or not?
No.
You see some positive in development, as
Yes.
it has happened in the last 30, 40, 50 years in India?
I think there is development and there's ill-considered development.
So there is no positive development according to you in India?
No, I think there are examples of positive development, and there are many more, unfortunately, examples of development which has gone wrong. I think we also need to question what we mean by development.
Now,
is development increasing GDP? Is it increasing supposed ideas of productivity, employment, etc.? How are we not looking at development as actually producing a healthy, humane existence?
would you agree that bringing jobs to people is development, or is that irrelevant according to you?
It is relevant, but in the broader context of a humane existence. Having a job but being brutalized on your way to work is not a humane existence.
Since time is short, Manoj, I'll ask the last question. As an artist, do you live in the world of myths or in the world of facts?
As an artist, I have the great luxury of inhabiting many worlds.
So
Facts, myths, and others.
You have the luxury of not being unemployed, am I right?
I am self-employed.
But you don't have to worry about employment because you are very comfortable in your upbringing because of the family you were brought up, born in, brought up, and nurtured. Am I right?
Yes, I
So
occupy a privileged position.
you're not like the poor, the vast majority of the people in India, to whom development is very, very important.
So perhaps occupying this position of privilege enables me to actually point out that the desire for immortality, which translates in this current moment into a desire for the good life, for the goods of capitalist production, can actually turn into a poison where the very basis of that production will disappear.
Ms. Shashi, as an artist, you are just an observer and not directly affected by it.
I am directly affected by it. My ill health right now is completely
But
produced
Ms.
by
Shashi,
the
that was
ecological
because
problems.
of a monkey. Surely that can't be because of development.
Chikungunya is to do with the poisoning of the city.
Have you brought this to the notice of the Lieutenant Governor?
I will.
Very well. That's all, my lord, since your lordship is cutting me.
All right. Would you like to make a statement?
Is it on? Yeah. Your Honor, we have just heard evidence of 3 artists who have tried in their own way and with the limited time at their disposal, to explain how art can become one of the ways in which authorities who examine the need for certain development must also consider. Each of these artists has brought to the fore paintings or video films or installations or some form of art. And because of the shortness of time, we have required to ask them to explain them. But otherwise, if we are immersed in the art, if we can look at the art for some time, we would come to an understanding of what the artist is trying to explain. Now, the Council for the State has been insistent repeatedly on two things. One is he has been repeatedly saying on behalf of the state, you have a partial understanding of the situation. And the artists have honestly replied, yes, there is a partial understanding. The second thing that the state is insistent on is, what is your solution? Do you have a solution? It's almost as if, okay, you don't like what we have done, give us the alternative. This itself shows the limited way in which the state approaches this issue. I would like to begin, therefore, by addressing these two aspects. Now, art acts as an avenue to represent other dimensions of the truth, which may not be represented in the regular, normal process of assessment, because artistic presentations do not conform to traditional modes of legal evidence. You bring books, you bring studies, you bring sketches. You don't bring an installation because the authority is not open to understanding it. Art uses an imaginary mode of inquiry. It pushes the boundaries. It includes myths and metaphors. Why? In order to make us pause and think of a different set of possibilities. So, Mr. Counsel for the State, I do not have a solution, but the artwork ought to make the state pause and imagine a different set of possibilities. Consider whether there is an alternative. These devices are what makes legal reasoning both resourceful and ingenious. Because after all, it is the intent of both the law and art to aspire towards the ideal. Secondly, sir, all the artists who testified today have with one voice emphasized that the ecosystem is a community of living beings and constant interaction with nature expresses itself in the form of culture and a way of life. And this, in my humble submission, forces us to confront an important question about law and its relationship to culture. What is law after all? Is law an ordering mechanism, a command structure which is given to us from above or from elsewhere? Is it that? Do we command people to do certain things? Or is law a reflection of the culture of a people? If it is the latter, and my humble submission is that law is a reflection of the culture of the people, then the influence of poetry, literature, art, music, myth is quite significant. We might think of poets, writers, and artists as cultural beacons. They bring alive the hopes, the despairs, the yearnings, the dreams of a section of society whose vision they represent. Should not law therefore take into consideration the artistic works also when considering the need for a particular project? Accepting art, therefore, on the same footing as other documents and mathematical formulae which are brought before committees, and these are presented by scientists and academic experts, will enable the authorities to ascertain the true impact of the project on all stakeholders. I emphasize the word all, because it is not just those who can articulate through writing or orally, but it is those who feel and who the artist understands their feelings and translates into art. Therefore, art gives you one side, no doubt, but that side is missing from our present day consideration of projects. And I believe that it is absolutely essential, particularly when taking decisions on large-scale projects which affect large number of people and affect a vast ecological area and have enormous consequences. What have our witnesses shown today? Mr. Ravi Agarwal has shown how a sustainable lifestyle can happen on the Yamuna river bank by a family cultivating marigolds for their existence. His film brings to the imagination the possibility of greater numbers of people viably coexisting with nature to make a living. If some people could do it, there must be many more people who are doing it. Mr. Agarwal also raises the issue that forcing one section of society, which is functioning very effectively, forcing them to give up their entire lifestyle, to give up their work, in order that somebody else benefits, or in order that there may be a better form of life that they may be entitled to, is not right. It's not fair, because our experience of these promises has only been very, very futile. The state has never delivered what it has promised to these sections of the people whom it has deprived of their life, their livelihood, their very existence. Ms. Altaf, in her testimony, has demonstrated how the government and the private sector have repeatedly violated the fundamental rights of people living in these forests. She has shown how violence has been used to forcibly grab land and take away people's rights over these natural sources. Her interactions with the Adivasi villagers has shown that there is a burning anger in them. Are we surprised about Naxalism then? It must also be appreciated that her medium, documentary filmmaking, is an art form which includes people's participation. The participants in her film speak from experience. They have felt it, they have been immersed in it, their lands have been taken away. She talked of humiliation, she talked of haunting. Where do experts capture these emotions, these sentiments that people who are displaced have? Where do they bring them to the table? And our third witness, Ms. Chachi, has used the medium of photographs and installations to explain the degradation in ecologies, particularly industrial development along the Yamuna River. She stated very boldly that she uses myths and stories to understand the relationship that exists between human beings.
May I interrupt? There are basically two questions involved. Question number one, is the evidence of artists relevant while taking the decision? For which three of your witnesses have spoken brilliantly.
Yes, sir.
And that's Mr. Growell answer. And there's a second question is, so far as this particular project is concerned, see, this particular project, there is a misery of the people who will be shifted, and there is also a misery of the people who's going to be benefited, because ultimately the interlinking is for the benefit of the droughted area, shortage of water. I wish you had presented some more evidence so far as this particular project was concerned.
I think, sir, our artists may not have worked in those areas, but they have worked with water, they have worked with land, and we have tried to bring different artists showing the kind of development, the effects of development that have occurred in other places. From it, we would like to bring to the notice of the Commission what are the possibilities that can go wrong if you do not learn from the past. If you do not understand that all is not hunky-dory with those whom you shift. The state proudly says we will rehabilitate. What is their state of rehabilitation? These are issues which must be understood, sir, by the Commission. And therefore, sir, I submit that merely looking at cost-benefit analysis, which is what is done by the experts, they bring you facts and figures. They are not any more important or any more relevant than, let us say, the plight of the people, which, since you cannot bring the people to the committee, you show through art, through a video, through an installation, you show what is happening. This is what we have tried to explain in this by bringing the artists as witnesses. And finally, sir, there is a presumption that nature is a resource that humans can exploit. The word exploit is important, sir. The state project planners believe that water is there, we can exploit it, we can use it, we can misuse it, we can take it as far as it can go. But in my humble submission, and I say this with great respect, sir, to exploit nature is foolish, it's foolhardy, and it's grossly negligent of the needs of beings other than humans, whom we never take into account. The animals, the plants, the biodiversity, we do not even consider them. We only consider giving rehabilitation to people, some tenements which you set up somewhere. The current assessment that is done of projects is also based on a very incorrect assumption of what is the real nature of the relationship between people, nature, and animals. I do not think project planners sitting in Delhi or in any city really understand what is the relationship that people have with nature. We see it in a limited way, and we hope, therefore, that bringing to the table the sensibilities of artists would introduce that dimension into the urban thinking that we generally have. I therefore submit, sir, on behalf of the petitioners, that there is a need for re-evaluation of the river linking project, and that in this exercise of re-evaluation, which we are asking our elected representatives in the Lok Sabha to do, artists be allowed to testify as expert witnesses through their works of art. I am deeply grateful, Your Honor.
Your Honor, I would begin by
Mr. Grover, like I said, there are two questions involved. The first question, whether artists have given their evidence, may not be of a similar kind of a project, but some other project, and they have talked about rehabilitation. As I understand, this record of the state has been very poor. Please elaborate on this point.
As Your Honor wishes. But first of all, may I just draw Your Honor's attention?
You proceed as you wish.
May I draw Your Honor's attention to the limited nature of the inquiry before this commission. This is not an open-ended inquiry. The petitioners have been able to successfully agitate with Parliament and got this commission established only to look at a precise question whether the evidence of artists would allow the state to reconsider the decision already made. And Your Honor's recommendation is to that effect, and to that effect only. We can't reopen all the issues here. And therefore, it is necessary to appreciate that the river linking project has already been granted and decision has been made and has been approved in accordance with law, which is prescribed by law. And therefore, the burden on the petitioners was to...
So you're hiding behind the Supreme Court judgment, which is
No, I'm not hiding. I am just saying that the inquiry here is limited. I'm not saying it's correct or incorrect, but today their burden is to say that the evidence that they lead would actually dislodge the decision. That's all. I'm not saying I'm taking the sanction of the Supreme Court. Assume the National Green Tribunal and the Supreme Court has not rendered any verdict. I have no problem with that. But we cannot ignore the fact that the river linking project has been inquired into by experts who have come with facts and figures, cost and benefit analysis, which may not be to the liking of the petitioners, but that is one view. Moreover, the law also prescribes that the consent of the vast majority of the people should be taken into account. People may not like it. Artists may not like the fact that people have voted in a particular way, but that's a fact. Now, also please appreciate, in the river linking project area, there is extreme shortage of water, which the experts have opined that this will solve. Thirsts of millions of people would actually be quenched. The agricultural production would increase. These are possible benefits, probable benefits, which can't be scoffed at. The state is not saying that there are no negative repercussions. There are negatives, but the negatives have been addressed. And my learned friend takes umbrage on the fact that I actually asked certain questions insistently to the witnesses. My endeavor was to ask them whether they had addressed those to the state. Therefore, I was trying to say that they should put their view. We are being inclusive rather than what my learned friends.
But you never heard them.
But they didn't opine. They only came later. That's why your lordships have been asked to do it. We have no problem. We are addressing your lordship.
Do you wish to say that if the next time, because interlinking project, this is the first one, and there are going to be many.
Very well. We have no problem.
If the next time they come, will you hear them?
We have no problem in hearing anybody in any manner.
Can I record your statement?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Why should we not? But the question is, in this river linking project, have they added value? So now let us look at what evidence has been led. Mr. Agarwal talks of marigold farming. As I questioned him, it was a local, sustainable project because of the small number of people. I questioned him of the fact whether technological change would actually have resulted in collapsing the project. I respectfully submit that Mr. Agarwal has not really thought about the fact that technology can be introduced.
I wish the government would have given me more time. I would have called more witnesses.
Very well.
I wish. But I'm also constrained by time. I have to give a report.
Constrained by time and terms of reference.
My Lord. That's right. That's right.
Ms. Altaf was very candid. She said the role of the artist is to question. This is very important, that there is no solution. And in the similar vein, Ms. Chachi, who, if I may say so with all due respect to her, lives in the world of myths. Maybe allegorical, but that is to be taken into account. Can that be really?
Mr. Grover, myths have certain lessons and to be learned.
Absolutely, absolutely. I am now
and especially this Samudra Manthan has a great lesson to be learned.
No doubt.
And so far as this particular issue is concerned, it's very, very relevant.
Very well, my lords. Let me just put it this way. The knowledge systems that Ms. Chachi aspires to have not been evolved. She says there are elements which can be borrowed, as I understand her. May I say with respect, I am considered to be a left-wing socialist, if you want. We have elements of socialism. I'm not bothered about it. No, I'm talking about, I'm acting as counsel. That's not very fair. Anyway, I'm just using an example like Miss Chachi uses a myth. Socialist systems appear to be very attractive. They are desirable. But do we have any successful models? The answer is no. And that's the tragedy of the knowledge system that Ms. Chachi talks about. I wish socialist systems had succeeded and there would be a model. But the reality and the tragedy is there are none. That is my answer to Ms. Chachi. And let me just add, and the question Your Honor posed, none of the witnesses who have come have looked at the merits of the river linking project directly. All of them drawn examples from the past.
That's why I wish I could have called some more witnesses.
Well, we have to go by the evidence as it is, and I would respectfully submit that my learned friend, very competent in her work, has miserably failed to bring the evidence that is required to discharge that burden. The evidence that has been led has not answered the core question whether the evidence they lead actually dislodges the verdict or the decision made by the decision makers, including the people and the experts. I would also seriously argue that, as Mr. Agarwal admits, that their view is no different from a citizen. What is the difference? Their view, I would submit, is impressionistic. Not of no value, but impressionistic. It should be taken into account.
Once you say it's a value, that means say they will be considered. Anytime.
I'm not saying it should not be considered, but it may be considered, but we have to decide on what is the weight to be given to it, the probative value of it.
Yeah.
That is the issue. And my respectful submission is that the weight...
That is for the government to concern. That is the government's concern. The government may give a value, may not give a
No,
value.
with respect, my lord, it is your job, your honest job, to decide today on the terms of reference and give recommendation to the government whether or not the petitioners have discharged the burden of trying to dislodge that. Otherwise, this is an exercise in futility. Like Your Honor has said, a lot of the government projects have failed, so have the court systems. And I don't want this commission to fail either. Your lordships have to give a verdict today. We don't want to wait for whatever the verdict is. As far as I'm concerned as counsel, I am not taking a vested position in this at all. My respectful submission is that the artists at best are partial, at worst they are biased. Because each one of us have a partial view of reality and we are colored by our ideologies and views. And impressionism lends to that coloring and the biased view. Finally, I would like to suggest, though my learned friend in her usual way has done a commendable job in presenting this, but it doesn't substitute for good argument. Her witnesses have built up a myth, and it's only a myth and not based on facts. And I rest my case.
Is the stenographer? Oh, just take down. The main point for the reference is whether the decision to construct the dams over rivers, just check it up which rivers dams will be constructed, and the interlinking by canal of those two rivers, disputed project, should be reviewed in the light of the evidence of artists or not. While examining this question, we will also examine the question whether the evidence of the artist is relevant whenever such decisions are undertaken. That's a kind of an introduction. And then we go into the, just put a heading, the facts. Interlinking is not a new concept. It's there for last 200 years. It was in 1858, it was a British engineer by the name of, dekh lijiyega, Cotton. Now, he was the first one to propose it. Of course, it is for the benefit of the England. They want to take the goods easily. That's what he proposed. You know, the English people. When the India became independent, Dr. Rao was the Minister for Power and Irrigation. He, the one who propagated it in the early 70s. Thereafter, the Ministry of Human Resource, they established, there's a board called, not some board, there's the name of the board here, you can check it up from Mr. Grover. It was set up, and that board has been making recommendations in favor of interlinking plans. Politically, interlinking has a mixed fortune. The UPA government didn't like it. The NDA pushed it. When the present government came, the Prime Minister is supposed to have said, oh, don't write it, it's political. Don't write it. That's what he said, that now the time has come to fulfill the ambition of Atal Bihari Vajpayee. That's what he said, but don't write it. It will be garbad. But in fact, the real push came from the Supreme Court in 2012. They disposed of a public interest PIL networking of this. Just find out the citation and just put it there. And there they directed that a special committee be constituted to oversee the plan for interlinking. A UP government didn't do anything about it, they sat quietly. You know, this is what happened, and contempt was filed. Well, don't put it there. And then, when don't say that. Then the present government came up, they established the committee, and that passed this particular project. It was challenged before the National Green Tribunal. It was dismissed. It was dismissed by the Supreme Court. And then the petitioners, dekh lijiye kya naam kya petitioners ka, you know, Khoj, whatever it is, pooch lijiyega. These petitioners, they made a petition to the Parliament, and they have constituted this commission under the Commission of Inquiry Act. And I have been appointed as a sole member of the commission. I have heard counsel for the parties. Oh, so sorry. उसके ऊपर लिखिए ना points for determination. ऐसा heading भी कर दीजिएगा. Oh, it's always very good. You know, the judgments, I don't know what judgments, nobody understands these judgments nowadays. Instead of this should give headings and this, the entire writing system should change actually. Okay. The following 2 points arise for determination in the matter. First, whether the evidence of the artist is relevant before finalizing such projects for constructing dams, interlinking rivers, giving mining, or, you know, where the large ecological question is there. इसको जरा अंग्रेजी ठीक कर लीजिएगा, ठीक है? And the second question, in case the answer to the first question is an affirmative, then should the disputed project be reviewed? अब ऊपर लिखिएगा, heading दीजिएगा, the decision. First point. The counsel for the respondent submits. Mr. Grover, please check. This is, I'm putting your submissions there. Dams, interlinking, such projects are necessary for the progress and development of the country. Engineers, economists, ecologists, biologists are the relevant people. Artists artists are subjective. They are not objective at all. And their evidence is not relevant. On the face of it, the argument is very attractive. One feels like accepting it. But once one goes deep into evidence produced in this case, a different picture emerges. Petitioner has produced 3 witnesses. देख लीजिएगा आपके सामने रिकॉर्ड हुआ था ना, तो एक अलग अलग पैराग्राफ में शॉर्ट में उसको सम करके लिख लीजिएगा, बाद में मैं करेक्ट कर दूंगा. ओके, हाँ, जैसे ये देख लीजिएगा, जो फर्स्ट विटनेस थे ना, दे वर बेसिकली आर्टिस्ट. द थर्ड विटनेस was थोड़ा सा कुछ फिलोसफी, मतलब she was philosopher. I mean कुछ फिलोसफी, मतलब जरा सा there is some distinction between the first 2 and the third one. इसको जैसा देख लीजिएगा अच्छी तरह से. There is no doubt that there is some subjectivity in the evidence of the artist. But this subjectivity arises out of the objective observation for a scene, for a culture, observing it for a long time. It cannot be said that their evidence is devoid of reality. In this case, they have shown, they have described the things as they are, they have shown what is the culture of the people who would, these people are not to be disclosed, what is the culture of the people generally, and they have also shown the devastation that such huge projects may cause. In my opinion, if a group of artists that has spent time with the people that are likely to be displaced, or the place which is likely, whose landscape is likely to be changed, or they have worked with the people where such similar projects were undertaken, they come forward before the court, they come forward before the government before decision is taken, and they say they want to lead evidence, then such evidence should be considered. As a matter of fact, this was accepted, very fairly accepted by Mr. Grover, Counsel for the State. Second point. The counsel for the petitioner submits that the evidence of the artist is relevant. It has not been seen in this particular case. The decision to go ahead with the disputed project should be rolled back. The matter should be sent back to the government. The government may hear the evidence of the artist, and thereafter a fresh decision may be taken. I wish. Anyway, in my opinion, it is not necessary to do so. Whatever evidence the petitioner wanted to produce has already been produced. It is here, it is important, when such important decisions are taken, it is very necessary they should be finalized quickly, either yes or no. Sending the matter back would again take a lot of time, and I think it will be much better if I proceed to consider that evidence and decide it finally one way or the other. Here there is no evidence that because of disputed project, any species or any biodiversity will become extinct. Even if that be the case, we have the example of snail darter. Snail darter is a very small fish. It's 3 inch की fish होती है, इतनी बड़ी. And it used to be found in US in a river called Little Tennessee River. And in the 70s, in late 60s and 70s, जैसे देख लीजिएगा इसको, विकिपीडिया से मत देखिएगा, सब फर्जी नॉलेज रहती है उसमें. They started building a dam called Telco Dam. The biologists had some concern. In this, the snail darter was actually an endangered species, and it was so mentioned in US Endangered Species Act. Biologists at that time expressed concern. Once the dam is built, the water will be stopped, it will become stale, and it is possible the snail darter as a species will become extinct. They filed a suit. The suit was dismissed. I think this could be checked. It got dismissed by trial court, dismissed by the first appellate court, and the matter was taken Supreme Court. But US Supreme Court, देख लेगा decision देखेगा, it is a Tally Valley Authority versus I don't know, देख लीजिएगा. In that case, the Supreme Court allowed the appeal and they stopped the construction of the dam. At that time, dam was almost complete. Billions of dollars were spent, and the politicians of the area got very active. They sort of lobbied, and ultimately the Congress amended the law. Telco Dam was taken out of the US Endangered Species Act. The dam was completed. But what they did was, before the dam was completed, they shifted the snail darter to another river, Hiwassee. And there, nobody thought they could flourish. There they flourished. They are now in abundance. So much in abundance, the category of snail darter has been changed from endanger to threatened. And perhaps soon, it will be no longer a threatened species as well. In case, if there is such issue, such experiments must be carried out before going ahead with it. Mr. Grover, but you will, some trees will be destroyed, you will plant a number of trees, whatever it is.
We undertake to do whatever your lordship suggests.
No, you do that. I mean, you have to.
We shall definitely.
The respondents have assured that they will plant sufficient number of trees that are likely to be destroyed. They also assure that rehabilitation, this assurance, I have my doubts. But anyway.
Your lordship may appoint a supervising monitoring committee, my lords.
I wish I was a court. It's a commission inquiry.
No, your lordship may recommend.
They will have to go the matter back to the Supreme Court to do that. The oustees will be rehabilitated. It is true that oustees.
Not where they put them, just plain areas. Please give a recommendation.
I would say that, but like Mr. Grover says, my hands are tight. You know, by the terms of this, you have to go back to the Neil Green Tribunal or the Supreme Court. And I wish this time you'll succeed. Oh, where was I? Okay, yeah. This is what I was saying. It is true that oustees will lose the landscape, but they will find a new landscape, and I hope they would be converted into. It would not be as beautiful as it is, but it would be a different landscape. There is also the evidence which is produced by the petitioner is one-sided. They have given the misery, the culture and the greenery, the happiness at present. But they have not depicted, they have not seen the misery, the difficulties of the areas where there are floods, where there is drought, where there is no water. Ultimately, this project is going to help there. And in ultimate analysis, one has to balance between the two. The government may not be the best person to do it, but that's the job our Constitution entrusts to the government. As nothing has come in the evidence, with reluctance, I uphold the project and let the project go on. Just a second, have a seat. A caveat, just put a caveat. I have upheld this disputed project But such decisions are never easy. It is a common knowledge that rehabilitation is poor. And ecological loss can neither be compensated nor replaced. The government should always be extra cautious whenever they undertake such projects. There is a very old saying, we have not inherited this planet Mother Earth from our parents. We have borrowed it from our children. It is for us how we wish to pass it on them. The garbage, the kachara of development, or the beauty of this, or the beautiful of the landscape, which we saw in some of the clips today. The old saying, which I have just pointed out, is a golden rule. That should govern our action. And that should also guide the government whenever it's deciding to go ahead with such project. अब एक किसी और heading करिएगा. Some observations and suggestions. Mr. Grover, do you know that the story Mr. Chachi said, there was this myth, there were many interpretations to it, and there is some addition which she did not say. Please, I'll just narrate that, some additions also. In old time, our ancient saints, they wanted to tell a lesson. It was not easy. They always told through the stories. They mix it with the gods, mythology, so that people will easily accept it. Samudra Manthan is one of them. One interpretation on one side of the story was told by PW3. But there is another interpretation to it, which is, to my mind, is very relevant. The story of Samudra Manthan is a story of development. It is a story of progress. The churning, that represents effort. Without effort, there cannot be development. And the ratans, कितने रत्न निकले थे? 14 कि 19? देखिएगा भाई, 14 शायद कुछ 14 कहती हैं, कुछ 29 कहती हैं. The different ratans and devis and apsaras and amrit, they are kept. These are the benefits of the development and progress. But one must remember the first thing that was produced, and that was poison. And what happened at that time? Lord Shiv. हमारे में क्यों लोग शिवा शिवा कहते हैं? मतलब शिव is the correct pronunciation. शिवा कुछ अंग्रेजी ज़्यादा हावी हो गई लगता है. Lord Shiv was a savior. He drank it. And there is an addition to it. The poison would have killed him. He was so dangerous, it would have killed him. But Parvati, his consort, was next to him. What she did she held his neck. And that is why the poison stayed there. To my mind, what the ancients wanted to say, if you want to progress, if you want a development, you have to work hard. You will get benefits, but you will get a poison. And in order to avoid poison, you must have Lord Shiv. But who is Lord Shiv? There is, in modern time, Lord Shiv is good practices. Recycling, use a renewable source of energy. Oh, do you know that Chhattisgarh High Court is the first court in the world to be solar powered? And that's the example should be taken by the other courts, the other places. Oh, well, see, I'm so sorry, I get off track, I was talking about modern Shiva. Modern Shiva is the healthy practices, recycling, use a renewable source of energy, conservation, conservation and harvesting of water, construction of greener buildings, leading simpler life, and last but not the least, family planning and population control. Dudo nahao, puto phalo. You may be bestowed with wealth and many children is a traditional blessing in our country. And we, like fools, don't write like fools. We have been blindly following it. We're just multiplying. There are too many. We are already 1.25 billion. Another 20 years, we'll cross the 1.5 billions. Our country cannot accept it. In case the population keeps on increasing as it is, we may be forced to take a decision which would be very unreasonable, for which our children will never forgive us. It is these healthy practices that is modern Shiva. It has to be popularized. That has to be adopted. But along with modern Shiva is not sufficient. Lord Shiva would have died if there was no Parvati. It was she who saved him by holding his neck. To my mind, the Parvati is these artists. These healthy practices have to be popularized, and they can be best popularized by the artists. They can very easily convey the difficult concept to the people, and they would be a Parvati they would be the modern Parvati in the story. Mr. Grover, you see, the money makes the mayor go. So why doesn't the government should allocate them sufficient funds to popularize these healthy practices? Will you do that?
I will indeed convey it to the government.
Please.
It's a very reasonable suggestion.
Please. So the modern Shiv, the healthy practices, and Devi, the artists, Devi Arti, and the artists, Devi Parvati, they would popularize it, and perhaps we may not have to take any difficult decisions. Next, likhiyega, heading, conclusions and directions. My conclusions and directions are as follows. The evidence of the artist is not irrelevant, and at the time of undertaking such projects affecting ecology, landscape, if any group of artists present their view, then that may also be considered along with other factors. Mr. Grover, I have not mentioned it is conclusive. It is one of the factors. You have to consider it.
Indeed,
What value is to be given is for the government.
Yes.
B, there is, with sad heart, there is no justification to review or roll back the disputed project. The healthy practices, modern Shiva, mentioned under the heading, some observation and suggestion should be encouraged by providing sufficient funds to the artists, the modern Parvati. With these observations and directions, the present reference is disposed of. Let this opinion, along with the record of the case, be sent to the government for appropriate action. इसमें ना शुरू में लिखा ना देखिए इस एक जैसा appreciation लिख लीजिएगा for the councils and for the witnesses, उनको एक thank भी दे दीजिएगा जैसा आप usually करती हैं. Mr. Grover, this has been a difficult decision. There are many times you come across a decision you wish you were not a party to them. But, well, one has to do a duty.
Indeed, my
duty is there. Ms. Alvarez, I wish I could decide the matter in your favor.
Thank you, sir. But
I'm so sorry. I wish I could decide in your favor.
We have learned what we should get the artists, what kind of evidence we need to also produce. For that, I'm really
There will
grateful.
always be the next chance.
Yes, sir. I have to be hopeful.
Oblige.
Obliged, sir.
Please rise.
Stage clear, house lights on. This evening, the role of the judge has been performed by Justice Jitendra Singh. Counsel representing the state has been performed by Anand Grover. Counsel representing the petitioners has been performed by Norma Alvarez. The artist witnesses have been performed by Ravi Agarwal, Navjot Altaf, and Shiba Chachi. The role of the court stenographer has been performed by Sakina Hussain. The petitioners have been Khoj International Artists Association and Zuleikha Chaudhari. Zuleikha was also performing the role of the court master. We thank you all for coming.